Greetings, undesirable characters. Ooh, what are they? Oh god, no. Oh. Why? Hack and slash games have had a bit of a dry spell lately. Rather, exceptionally good hack and slash loot games have been in hiding for the last decade or so. Diablo 2 was released back in 2000, with its expansion coming out the next year, and spelled the peak, in this humble reviewer's opinion, of the hack and slash loot fest. Diablo 3 was a massive disappointment and left me with a rather foul taste for the direction the genre seemed to be headed. Path of Exile is Grinding Gear Games' latest entry into the genre. The question is, will it take us back to the Golden Age, or will it remain a side note that ultimately disappoints? Path of Exile is an isometric hack-and-slash game, placing the player in control of one of 7 characters. These characters present the traditional array of classes that one might find in an RPG, with sneaking shadows, rampaging marauders, and incantation-whispering witches. Each class has a wealth of spells at their disposal, and, remarkably, a skill tree that seems more daunting than trying to learn the basics of a mount and blade game. The game is a fairly simplistic top-down RPG. You click on a monster, and your guy hits him with a satisfying thunk of a mallet on bone or thwick of a sword through flesh. If you ever had asked me what keeps games like Path of Exile entertaining, I would say it's the complex no-return skill systems and the surge of excitement of finding a rare item, not necessarily the combat. Path of Exile brings both of these elements back, though, and builds on them by mixing up the traditional formula Diablo had established so long ago. Skills are done in an entirely new fashion. In other games, upon leveling, the player is granted a number of skill points to allocate as they please to the different active and passive abilities in their respective trees. Path of Exile departs from this tradition, making skills into slot-based gems that are placed into items. Each of these gems has its own level, and gain experience much like the player, progressively becoming more effective over time and with use. The lack of active skills in the skill tree means that all points earned through character level are allocated to passive skills, such as increasing mana, damage, attack speed, and other stats. This also means that all of your actual active skills can be transferred from item to item, or can retain the level that you've gotten them to if you decide to shelve the skill for a while. While it may seem rather mundane, I often found myself working out which skills would be best to bring along with me, as the new piece of armor that has fantastic stats may not necessarily have the proper slots to retain the skill set that you've been using. The system as a whole adds a sense of skill progression that changes as you upgrade your armor, which, given the nature of the game, is all the time. The fluid adaptation that it forces players to get used to keeps the otherwise I hit stuff and it died gameplay feeling dynamic and interesting. The passive skill tree is also much more simplistic than it looks. Each class starts at a different primary node, which is access to different paths based on the character's primary statistic. Some passive skills can also drastically change gameplay, such as those that make it so you have 1 health no matter what, but have a massive energy shield, or those that make it so you can never miss, but also lose the ability to critically strike. While the entire tree may seem unbelievably complex, each class only has a few paths to follow at any given time. The combination of useful passive increases, rather than mundane ones that have little noticeable effect, and the simplicity of the system is wonderful. The in-game store also mixes things up. Instead of gold, Path of Exile uses a barter system, where enhancement items are traded for actual gear. It makes trading into a tough decision sometimes, since you could very well trade away the last scroll you have to identify items with for a better or potentially better piece of gear. The game, outside of its implementation of skills, skill tree, and barter system, follows a fairly traditional hack-and-slash setup. The player grabs a quest from the hub village, goes out into the wilderness, and kills hundreds upon hundreds of enemies for no other reason than they are, undoubtedly, evil. In some respect, or something. And they have lots of loot. Aesthetically, the game is actually surprisingly detailed. The environments are fantastically detailed, and enemies at times even use environmental objects like trees or walls to enter the fight, which gives an excellent sense of ambient life to the surrounding areas. Despite the level of polish, though, there are still problems within the game. For one, some of the UI seems a little less responsive than it could be. Players cannot change gear while within certain UI pages, such as when selling items, which can be frustrating when you're in a hurry or just like things to be easy to work with. Alongside that, some of the mechanics that the bosses use seem to be incredibly difficult to counter. A friend and I attempted several times to beat the game on Nemesis mode, which requires that the players complete the game without ever dying. The idea being that if you can complete all the challenges, you get a free t-shirt. We made it to the final tower, and upon entering one of the floors was confronted with a boss. This particular boss throws lightning traps, which, combined with the light level of the tower and the fact that the traps are nigh invisible, instantly killed both of us. We could not see the boss yet, and had no idea that she was there until we investigated later on after being kicked down to normal difficulty. While I understand difficulty is a mechanic that can be fun, take Dark Souls for example, there are things, such as this boss, that are just frustrating. The same goes for the final boss, who has some very interesting mechanics that can entirely obliterate players if they haven't stacked a huge amount of defense and health, which restricts the otherwise open-ended way of building characters. The only conclusion I can come to in terms of these mechanics is that the game is attempting to make people play together. Given the nature of our situation and how little time I can usually spend in one sitting playing a game, I find the attempt to force us all to find a full group of 6 people to play a little annoying, especially when the rest of the experience is so much fun. The problems can be compounded when the server decides to have a hiccup. Several times I was booted back to the launch screen while traveling through an area I had not yet found the portal to, which then led to me having to trek back through everything I had already explored to get back to where I already was. Given enough time outside an area, it will also reset, which, given how large some of the areas are, can be a little annoying when the game decides to boot you back to login. As a whole, Path of Exile is exactly what I've been waiting for in a Diablo-esque RPG since Diablo 2. It mixes the working systems of old with new ways of approaching mechanics that keeps the entire thing fresh and fluid, and really makes the player think about each encounter. Despite some minor problems, the game still shines as a gem of what a passionate development team can accomplish. Plus, it's free to play, so what do you have to lose? Path of Exile from Grinding Gear Games gets a 9 out of 10, and is available for free both on their website and on Steam. Until next time, cheers, and stay awesome.